welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. A little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Matt, a big-time day. UFC 284 coming at you live later on tonight. And if the world were like high school, everybody would fail. Because if you remember back when your teachers would tell you, listen, nobody's going to do your homework for you. You have to make sure that you're on time. You have to make sure that you listen. Because I said at the start of the week, I'm going to be away on the weekend. I'm going to be away on Saturday, so we have to do kicks early. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of people in the chat that's going to catch them completely off guard.
100%.
We also dropped Santos versus Blanchfield. People are going to miss that, so I'm going to tell them right now. Santos versus Blanchfield is out there. The show is very early for kicks. The fights don't start until tonight. But I fly out, and I'm going to miss some of the fights anyway. Then I'm going to miss them when I sleep, and then I'm going to fly out again in the morning. So, Matt, it is a very big weekend in terms of travel for me. But it's a very big weekend for the fights as well. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We have a lot to talk about. We have an early show. I have to finish packing, and I have to get the heck out of here.
And this might not be the greatest sales point for the next card that we do have, but I'm actually pretty excited for this pay-per-view. And I don't know if it is because we just got done talking about Santos versus Blanchfield, which isn't the greatest card of all time, for being 100% honest, but I think the top two fights on this pay-per-view are as good as any top two fights we've really ever had on any pay-per-view, because Yair Rodrigues versus Josh Emmett, is it a fight that has a lot of heat behind it? Is there a lot of bad blood? No, not really. It's just two extremely talented fighters who are very different fighters too, and they're brutally effective in their own way. Yair has absurd kicks. He has very good boxing. He's this very eye-catching talent, whereas for Josh Emmett, nothing he does is all that, unique. He throws a lot of overhands. He's extremely tough. He has great cardio, and he does have that wrestling in the back pocket. I think that's an incredible fight. And of course, pound for pound number 1 versus pound for pound number 2. I know Dana White can't remember Islam Makhachev's name, but hopefully we have given him his flowers, because these two guys are some of the best fighters in the world, regardless of weight classes, regardless of organizations. And I don't know how you couldn't be excited for this fight.
We're getting Mick rolled over there in Australia. He's going to be handing out the belts. Mick Maynard, Australia's own. Over there in the chat, Professor Chris is hanging out. Rebel Reseller. John Hansen, aren't we usually here 2 hours prior? Not 8? I mean, John Hansen, my guy. Like, what did I say at the start of the show, pal? It's just the way that it is. But a roll. Chris McDowell, all sorts of people hanging out over there in the chat. Make sure you let us know who you have in these fights, as we always do with Fight Night Picks Kicks. We talk about the fight of the night, the possibilities, and oh boy, is there definitely some sting in one of those picks now. I will say this about the weigh-ins, and the reason why we do kicks. There were 2 weight misses. There were a lot of people that weighed in with the cone of shame around them. So we're going to have a lot to talk about today with these fights. But we'll throw it on over to the fight of the night screen. And for Josh Emmett, he's got a new nickname. He looks like a skeleton over after the weigh-ins. And for Yair Rodrigues, he's chewing bubble gum. He's wearing sunglasses. Neither one of those guys looked at their best, I would say, on the scales. But when you look at both of them, even side portrait, like Yair Rodrigues, very slim. Josh Emmett, the muscles in his back and all of his ribs. So it was kind of freaky watching both those guys weigh in. You would think natural weight class, like, if they didn't have to cut weight, 170 maybe? Like, it's wild to see these guys at 145, but kudos to them. They both made the weight.
I'm glad you say that. Like, they both are big for the division in very different ways, though. Like, Yair's just very tall, very lanky for the division. Josh Emmett is built like a brick shithouse, though. Like, there are very few men on planet Earth built like Josh Emmett. I would have to get on that, like, Barry Bonds MVP juice to look like Josh Emmett, but he hit so incredibly hard. That's the great thing about Emmett, too. He could be getting outclassed for, 3.5 rounds, 4.5 rounds in this fight. He carries his power late. He's always got that one X factor in his back pocket. I just think this fight's going to be one of those fight of the year type contenders. I really do. Like, I think we're going to be talking about this fight by the end of the year.
PMN 209 saying, are you going to the event? If I flew from Eastern Canada to Australia, it'd probably take me 2 days.
That'd be a long
There's a
time.
fat chance that I make it to that. Matt, Joshua Culibao, Melsik, Baghdasaryan. So we have this like a low-key banger on the card. Josh Culibao's last 2 fights, they pretty well been fight of the nights. Even his fight against Charles Jourdain was really wild a few fights ago. And for Melsik Baghdasaryan, we haven't seen necessarily the breakout excitement type of fight. His fight against Bruno Souza was kind of a stinker. His fight before that, he did look good in his UFC debut, but Melsik coming off the hand injury, he comes in, he weighs in, he looks good, and then all of a sudden, like I said on Twitter, he looked like he was chewing cud, because he was chewing gum and he was like smacking his gum, and then all of a sudden, like he's trying to just force choke Joshua Culibao.
Where did all of this bad blood come from on weigh-in day? Like, it just felt like, okay, the build-up for the pay-per-view, it hasn't been the most hyped. I know Islam had a big issue with just the promotion behind this. I'm not really here to get into that, but still, there didn't seem to be that much bad blood between any of these fights. Then all of a sudden, I'm watching the face-offs last night, and just everybody tries to get into a fist fight on stage.
Yeah, it was really weird, but I think this is going to be one of those fights that could be an absolute banger. Chad Robertson, y'all see Guru's video on Josh Emmett. I don't watch his stuff.
I'm not.
Respectfully. Matt, when it does come to this card, again, we do have a lot to talk about, and Cameron's already asking about it. Can Brenner take Zubaira Tukhugov down even once? Well, listen, Cameron, that's where this card starts. So, let's start there, Matt, and we'll go all the way down through the entire card. For Zubaira Tukhugov, got a little bit of shine this week. He got to hang out with his buddy in bed on Embedded, and then, Matt, you know where it ended up? Looking like
with the bros.
Looking like death over there on the scale.
Remember what we said at the start of the week? He's Mr. Oh, by the way. It would be really easy to just get yourself attached to his skills and think, wow, this is a very talented competitor who can beat a lot of really good fighters in this division. But there's always a, oh, didn't he pull out of his last fight last minute? Didn't he have a weight issue?
Yeah, we had a pop-up in the video of him pulling out of the fight like the day before against Lucas Almeida due to weight cutting related complications. And then he weighs 157.5 yesterday, and he looked terrible on the scale.
He didn't look good at all.
Like, there, I'll bring it back up for the folks. Like, he did not look good.
Exactly, and it is kind of a level of unprofessionalism from Tukhugov at this stage, because, again, he does have all the tools to be a really successful athlete in MMA. He's extremely talented. We talk about how good his hands are, how good the wrestling is, and all that. It's just, what do you really do with the guy after this? Because I still expect him to win this fight. Again, I know he looked really bad on the scales. I do worry about him missing weight and all of the sort of things that come along with that. But I still think it is a huge step up for Brenner. And I just don't know where Tukhugov goes after this. Like, even if he wins and dominates every second of this fight, you can't really give him another contender. You can't really give him another up-and-comer because you're just worried about whether or not he's going to pull out and put any promotion behind it.
Yeah, that's it. Like, over there in the comments section, Matt, Professor Chris missed. I think he definitely did miss. And Chad Robertson, MMA community's got to come together. There's so many channels out there, my guy. Like, I just watch the fights. I watch other sports. I come here, I do my thing, and then I travel on the weekends, apparently. That's the way that it goes. Amazing Gaming saying, Zubaira, let's go. The trouble for me looking at this fight, can Elvis Brenner get the takedown? He might be able to. The last time Tukhugov missed weight and had a fight and actually stepped into the cage, it was against Mean Hakeem Dawodu in a fight where fans booed, and at the end of it, they were like, come on, let's fight, as Dawodu's chasing Tukhugov across the cage, and Tukugov's trying to egg him on. It was one of the worst ends to a fight I've ever seen. Now, when it does come down to this one, Elvis Brenner, he is and I read it right before we filmed this. So on Saturday, Cage Side Press put an article out there. Sean Bitter does those Welcome to the UFC promos. So I read his promo because I already talked about Brenner at the start of the week and I was confused. He basically laid it on the line like, I don't know why the UFC signed this guy. He's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. He's not necessarily ready for that big time push, but the Topology numbers, Tukhugov, number 25 lightweight in the world. Brenner, number 41 regional Brazilian lightweight. So it really is a step too soon. Now, Brenner has a good left hand, but he also doesn't defend on the left-hand side, and he gets hit by big left hands. He gets caught in the pocket for a time or two. He gets caught in the mirror in a lot of his fights. His losses are to some all-right competition. Like his last loss against Santos, now the LFA champ over there. He won the tournament that they had in Brazil. But for Brenner, to me, it's a step too soon. Tukhugov is a decently well-rounded fighter, combat sambo background. His striking is quite good at a Tiger Muay Thai. I don't know what he's going to look like with that weight miss. Over 95% of the fans at Fight Night Picks on the phone that I dropped on the Instagram poll have Tukhugov to get the win.
And the thing is, Tukhugov's not a big guy for the division.
No,
like, I didn't think he was going to miss weight at 155. You don't really
he's a former featherweight.
Exactly. And there's some featherweights, like Dan Hooker when he moved from featherweight to lightweight, and then I know he moved back down, but he doesn't look small when he fights at lightweight. Like, he's a big guy even for the lightweight division. Tukhugov's going to be small in this division if he continues to fight here. So I was a little surprised to see him have such a difficult weight cut based off of how just average he's going to kind of fit into the 155-pound division.
Yeah, it really is a tough one. So for me, I do have Zubaira Tukhugov representing Tiger Muay Thai over Shoot the Box Diego Lima's Mr. Elvis Brenner. He's got Charles Oliveira out there with him. The team at Diego Lima, they all dye their hair and hang out, but they don't go ride or die like the boys in bed. I mean, back outside boys, just hanging out.
Is there, like, are they separated by a sheet, or are they both under the sheet and the comforters?
I don't know. You gotta
That's my only question.
You gotta sweat it out somehow. Shane Young's taking on Blake Bilder, and for Blake Bilder, he's got tattoos. For Shane Young at the ceremonial weigh-ins, he had red paint on his face, and he didn't do the haka, but he did the tongue roll out. He's taking on a Bilder that's a former CFFC champ, a Dana White's Contender Series contract winner. Dana White said, I don't sign 32-year-olds. And then he signed Blake Bilder. And next weekend, we have a 35-year-old making his UFC debut. And Themba Grimbo's also 32, but we don't sign 32-year-olds. But they do all the freaking time. Now, Matt, when it comes down to this matchup for Shane Young, he's been out for years, so maybe it's the all must have forgot type performance. Joe Lopez on the last episode of The Embedded, it was weird that they filmed it, edited in, and put it in the episode where he's like, oh, Eugene Behrman comes over for the last 2 days. Oh, look at me, I'm coach of the year. Like, Joe Lopez, there's two winners of Fight Week. Joe Lopez and Islam Makhachev in terms of gaining fans, but Joe Lopez, like, just shot to the gut. It was funny, but Eugene didn't look like it was all that funny. So when it does come down to this, Shane Young representing City Kickboxing. You got Blake Bilder representing Sub Fighter, but 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu in Vegas. He's trained in California for, you know, most of this one. So out of this, Lucas Taylor saying Bilder for the dog win. A lot of people talking about the MMA guru. I guess that's fun, but what's the pick in this one?
I do have Blake Bilder, and I do think he is the more damaging of the two, especially if he is able to get it to the range which best suits him, which is on the inside, because Young has good straight shots. He does. The problem is, defensively, he's very lacking when he does let his hands go. Now, maybe he has been able to fix that, like you said, with all of this time off. I just worry about him being able to make some of those wholesale adjustments to his game, because that's where the best part of his offense comes from, too. And I know that sometimes being a really aggressive fighter doesn't help you, and it's a complete negative, but sometimes letting your hands go, well, you have to do it just at some point throughout the fight. But for Young, I just think the thing that makes him special is that he'll let his hands go a little bit, and I think that's going to it's really going to hurt him in this matchup against Bilder, as I really struggle with
Bilder gets dropped early in his fights. He got dropped in both of his title fights with CFFC. In his fight against Alex Morgan on Contender Series, he didn't struggle in that way. I do worry about Bilder in the first round. The nice thing about Shane Young is he blends those long-range attacks to the fact that it's almost like guys get caught in a mirror. He crashes distance, and he starts to use elbows, and he starts to use different attacks. And
would you agree with me, though?
Yep.
This is one of those fights for Bilder. Even if he wins this, his style is going to be a difficult style to possess if you continue to climb the ranks. Because like you said, he did get hurt in those title fights before he came to the UFC. He has faced adversity, which is nice to see, but it's nice to see
it's not
at
against
the
good
UFC level,
competition.
Exactly, against guys who are like borderline ranked fighters or fighters in the rankings. So I think for Bilder, he's going to have one of those fun fighting styles, but a little part of me worries that he could just fall into that like ML mech category.
To me, when I do look at it, it's the fact that Shane Young likes to double up, triple up on the jab, which is like a Jason Perillo staple. But the thing that he doesn't have that Jason Perillo would probably get him into is bring your hands up. Don't just let them drop at the end of those combinations. And then for Blake Bilder, he likes to counter-strike on those. That's why I like him in this one. I think Bilder's a little bit more well-rounded. The chin has been checked, so it worries me in a matchup like this. Shane Young's better than pretty well everybody that Blake Bilder's fought. So this is Bilder's toughest fight to date, which might not be much of a surprise because he's in the UFC. The odds on the matchup, if we can bring them up, they're kind of all over the place. But Shane Young is favored to get the win. Blake Bilder is the slight underdog. Professor Chris, anyone ever had stats on guys that have been out for a while? I'm curious how much it's actually mattered. I can't say that I do on this matchup. But I will bring up the fan vote at Fight Night Picks. 67% going Bilder in the matchup. We both have Bilder.
We do, yeah.
All right, we'll move on to the next fight, Matt. Loma Lookboonmee taking on Elise Reed. I think both these women have gained stock throughout the fight week. Both of them show up on weight, in shape, 115.5 for Elise Reed. Also a former CFFC champ, just like Blake Bilder. For Loma Lookboonmee, got her start over there with Full Metal Dojo, and now she's in the UFC, and she's had an interesting run. They both have. Elise Reed's kind of alternated wins and losses. Loma went on a nice run, lost to Mexican-Canadian star Lupe Godinez, and then Loma's last time out dominated Denise Gomez, and when she beat D. Gomes, yes, Loma did get into some bad positions in that one. I don't necessarily see Elise Reed having those same successes on the mat, so for that reason, I do like Loma with the hand speed and whatnot, but you're taking on a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo and Elise Reed. She definitely is adept on the feet. She's really good at strike off her back foot, too. I do like Loma in this one. I see Bondfish saying Reed is a sleeper in this. That much is true. She is a really tricky type of fighter for some of these women that are outside of the rankings. So I can see this being a fun stand-up fight and really kind of getting people interested on the prelims.
And I think if Reed can keep Loma Lookboonmee on the furthest part of her reach, it should be able to help her quite a bit, because once Loma gets on the inside, she's really good at throwing flurries and getting really good volume at that point. But the big issue I do have with Lookboonmee moving forward is there does seem to be a 1 to 2 minute point in every single one of her fights where you're going, hey, what are you doing right now? And it's something that you can improve upon, because fight IQ is something that can be improved upon quite easily. But it does worry me, because her level of competition has always kind of been the same. And if she does win this fight, it probably is time to start giving her more difficult fights further up in the division. But the same thing has to be said for Elise Reed too. And I do agree with you. Reed, with her kicking style and with her ability to strike on the back foot, I think there is a very fine Goldilocks range to where she can have success with her own striking. I just think Lookboonmee is going to be able to close that distance enough and really be able to flurry on her on the inside. Because one thing Loma's really good at, especially from the clinches, going to the body. Now, I know she's not the biggest fighter in the world, so of course it's going to be a much more available target, but I think that will help her in this matchup against Reed. Go to the body a little bit, start to work at her cardio a bit, and I think it will make for an interesting fight as it goes later.
Matt, the people tuning in, they continue to show up because this is a very early show on this Saturday morning. Classical Andrew saying, am I crazy for thinking Volk has a chance? This dude's training videos have looked insane. Classical Andrew, I've been having dreams this week of Alexander Volkanovski going out there and completely outstriking Islam Makhachev, me looking like a dummy on the internet. So that's where my headspace been at all week.
Could the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world win an MMA fight? Well, yeah, probably. I'd say so. It is a very difficult match that he is in today, fight that he's in today, because of how dominant Islam is. But yeah, of course Volkanovski has a chance. Like, he's one of the most skilled fighters in the world.
Well, when it comes down to this matchup, 91% at Fight Night Picks going with Loma to get the win. She's about a 3-1 favorite in the fight. I'm going to go with Loma in this one, again, just based on the striking. And then we get into a tough one. Don Shainis. Shameless Don Shainis had a full camp for this fight. He weighed in with the cone. He weighed in successfully, 146. Jack Jenkins, he came in with the mustache, and he also has the mullet. So I do like this fight, Matt, because both guys are well-rounded in their own respects, but they're both completely different fighters. Don Shainis burns hot.
He does.
Like, it's blue flame hot. So for Don Shainis, he comes at you hard in the first round. Usually has some good lasting power in the second. I don't know what it's going to look like in the third. Whereas Jack Jenkins is a little bit more reserved. But when you look at both of these guys, can Shainis wrestle? Yes. Can Shainis grapple once he gets it down to the mat? Does he have good jiu-jitsu? 100%. Does he have good ground and pound? Yeah. Can he scramble off the bottom? Yeah. Don Shainis can do all of those things. Now, he throws big looping wide shots to close the distance. Can he clip his opponents? Again, yes. Like, Don Shainis can do all of these things. Jack Jenkins is a more technical striker, is a more patient fighter, has good wrestling, has good grappling. I do struggle with this fight, you know, out of all respects, because I think Shainis can go out there, wow the Australian crowd, get a finish. That would not necessarily surprise me in this fight more than some of the others on this card, because for Jenkins, we saw it on some of the regional scene tape. He burns hot at the same time, or he lasts, he waits, he fights really economically, and he has a style that's definitely more conducive out of these two guys to fighting to a decision.
Oh, without a doubt. And that's why I do favor Jenkins quite a bit in this matchup, because I think if he does fight in that patient manner, he'll be able to download the game plan of Shainis a lot easier. And the thing about Shainis is, some of those flurries are really effective, but they're normally effective early on in fights when he can overwhelm his opponents. Once they do start to get his timing and they can start to see some of the openings that he leaves for himself, that's when I think Jenkins can start to land some of those damaging boxing combinations from the outside from from his own counter shots. And not that Shainis can't have success on the feet. I just think you squared it up perfectly. It's that Shainis is such a wide and looping striker that a lot of those shots up the middle are going to catch him as he closes the distance. And we learned it from Fabricio Verdum when he fought Stipe all the way back when. Like, Jack Jenkins already hits pretty hard. If you're the guy walking forward into his punching power, it's just going to make him hit that much harder.
Fights in Brazil. Verdum's
just
amped
forward.
up. Just goes in there for the kill. Gets finished very quickly. Brazil's very sad. Metallica fan 676. Serious question though. Do you think the UFC will come to Canada this year? And there's some discourse about it when it does come down to the UFC coming to Canada. When they used to go to Quebec, like there was one blip with the Quebec Commission. Their new contracts that they just handed out seemed a little weird. So I don't know if, Canada's going to be down to clown when it comes to all of that. And then when it goes to Quebec, the last card in Montreal was UFC 186 when Horiguchi fought Demetrius Johnson. And they didn't open up all of the Bell Center, and it didn't sell all that well regardless.
I'll tell you this, though. One of the best cards of all time that's a free one was in Calgary, Alberta, of all things. Eddie Alvarez versus Dustin Poirier 2 was in Calgary. I don't know why, but Joanna fought Tisha Torres on that card. Jose Aldo fought Jeremy Stevens. That was a stacked card as there has ever been.
Brandor hitting the super chat. Good morning, guys. Lots of love. Deed OCD on this card. I don't know what that means.
It's gonna be a good one.
It's gonna be a good one. So let's get into it. So Brandor, thank you for the super chat. Thanks for the likes. If you can't, Matthew saying fire on the Calgary.
Been there one time. It was a cool city.
Saskatoon had Max Holloway, Yair Rodrigues, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So just hit up Canada if you want. And then
not
of course
Max Holloway, Yair Rodrigues. It was Charles Oliveira, Max Holloway.
That was it. And Halifax. I mean, they've had two.
They have.
Tarek Safadine, Rory McDonald, and then of course Travis Brown and Derek Lewis. But Matt, when it comes to our next fight, Jamie Mullarkey, Francisco Prado, we touched a lot on this one. Now, I was bullish on Francisco Prado, but then I read Sean Bitter's article that came out today with Cage Side Press on the deep dive in the prospect. And while it might be a little early for a 20-year-old, he was pretty down with Francisco Prado making the UFC. Now, I'm not so hot to trot because I think Prado leaves a lot of openings on the feet. He does swing wild. He swings with power. He gets a lot of takedowns. His takedown defense isn't all that good on the receiving end. But when you look at Mullarkey, the guy needs Phil Swift in his corner. Like Joaquin Buckley needed Dust in his corner. Now, Dust got a win. And I don't know if Phil Swift would get a win in that corner, but my God, Jamie Mullarkey takes a lot of damage.
He does take a lot of damage, and that's why I do think Prado can have a lot of success in this matchup. When you look at what Jamie Mullarkey struggles with, Prado fills the majority of those holes because he does hit extremely hard. He can go for wrestling, and I will be curious to see if he does go for takedowns in this matchup because not that Mullarkey's a bad grappler by any means. I think if Prado does get that in his mind a little bit, it'll help him open up his own striking and help him get closer to Mullarkey. And I know I feel like I'm setting this up very pro Prado, even though my pick is Mullarkey. I just feel like I should give some reasons for why the underdog can win this fight. Again, Mullarkey gets hurt in every fight he has ever been in. Win, lose, or draw. He's gonna get hurt even if he wins this fight. He's gonna get clipped early in the first round, probably back up a little bit, have to slow it down and then overwhelm Prado with his volume. We've seen Mullarkey fight like that, because that's basically how he fights all of his fights. I just worry about if Mullarkey can still withstand some of those punches, because at this point, he's not getting any younger, and I know he's, only 29 years old, but Mullarkey's taken some damage at this stage of his career, so you do worry a little bit about how many more big shots he can take, but I still think he's the much more well-rounded and the much more skilled fighter between these two. He does have his own paw, and that's the thing that you can't discount. Mullarkey doesn't have crazy power by any means, but if he puts his combinations together, it's very Gerald Mearshart-esque to where, that kind of hurt his opponent, and he just keeps on landing after the fact, and I do think we will see Mullarkey really overwhelm.
For me, going back and watching the regional tape, Francisco Prado did not fight good fighters, and in those fights, he was dropped in certain fights, he was dropped by much smaller fighters, he really struggled to get it going. He burns hot, kind of like a guy like Don Shainis, but he burns really hot in the first round. In the second round, sometimes he's able to go for some, they're more drawn out takedown attempts. I was going to say lazy. They're not lazy, but they're more drawn out all the way across the cage. Then he gets them and he dominates opponents on the ground. To me, I don't necessarily see Prado winning this fight. If he wins this fight, I swear to you, in the weeks following, on Question Mark Kicks next week, I'll Hulk Hogan this shirt and rip it open in front of the crowd. So when it comes down to this one, Jamie Mullarkey is a decent sized favorite, open minus 250, minus 275, Prado at a plus 226. And if we have a look at Fight Night Picks on Instagram for the total votes on the poll on this one, 65, now 66% on Mullarkey. So there are a fair amount of people. Butter Roll saying, I'll remember that. Sure. I don't like Prado. Wow. I like Prado. He's a young fighter. He's very talented. He leaves a lot of openings in his striking. He's very wild. Argentina with their prospects, not to lump them into that category, but they haven't been all that great. You got Ponzinibbio, and then there's the field. And the last fighter that we saw come in as a champion from Samurai Fight House was Eileen Perez. She had a wild week hyping herself up, and she went out like me blowing out a tiny candle. So it wasn't really much resistance in her fight. To me, I don't necessarily have Prado in this one, who's taking the fight on about a month's notice, replacing Nasrat Haqparast and taking on Mullarkey here.
I agree. I just think we're still a little bit low on Prado. You have a slow starter against a very, very powerful knockout artist who has very fast hands.
Amazing Gaming, I guess, needs a pump up saying, nope, Prado, lock it in. For me,
I'd be surprised to see Prado win, but it would make for an exciting prospect moving forward because he's not going to be in boring fights. That's the one thing I think we can both agree on. Like, let's say he does beat Mullarkey, he's going to then go fight Michael Johnson and just like throw overhands for 15 minutes.
Now in this matchup, Matt, we have Kleydson Rodrigues. He weighed in with the cone of shame. He missed weight 127. He's taking on the hometown guy Shannon Ross, 33. Mechanic, father of 4. Shannon Ross knocked out on Dana White's Contender Series, knocked down 3 times. And they gave him the contract. Matt, Shannon Ross has more experience. Shannon Ross represents the eastern portion of this country known as Australia. Shannon Ross. I don't think he wins this fight, even though Rodrigues missed weight.
I'm in the same boat. Again, we haven't really been switching our picks on question mark kicks nearly as much as we used to, but even with the weight miss, I just think Rodrigues, is the more well-rounded fighter. He's the younger fighter.
I don't think he's a better wrestler in this matchup.
I don't, but if they do start grappling on the mat, I think he can have his own moments and get back up to his feet. And I just think the strengths that he does have on the feet and his overall edge in athleticism, which again, with the weight miss, with the overall difficult weight cut, it will be interesting to see just how well he is able to last in this matchup if it does go late past first, past round 2. But I still do have Rodrigues even with the weight miss.
It's not fair, but my scale on this fight is, okay, Kleydson Rodrigues when he fought CJ Vergara. And I'm going to talk about CJ till the end of time. Because you know what? He's my new Zhumagulov, who's now the new Jamal Emmers. Like, we always had these guys, like, that's the litmus test. If you beat them, you're good. If you lose, you're not good. And when it comes down to it, I think CJ Vergara is a very talented fighter. I thought Kleydson Rodrigues beat him. Is Shannon Ross better than CJ Vergara? I don't think so. Obviously, the weight miss does scare you. Brandor, I think Rodrigues would have made weight. If they gave him a second shot in Australia, you can only weigh in once. And one thing to note, the weigh-ins were late, so you have less time to rehydrate, so we'll see how that one plays out. In this matchup against Shannon Ross, Rodrigues is a pretty big favorite, minus 335. He opened minus 183. So the lines change quite a bit for Kleydson Rodrigues. The total fan vote on this one, 75% going with Rodrigues. So let us know who you have in the matchup in the chat. But for me, I'm sticking with Rodrigues even with the weight miss.
Yeah, so am I.
All right, we move on to the next fight, Matt. Melsik Baghdasaryan, like he's Emperor Palpatine. He's just throwing that out there, but in real life. And he's taking on Joshua Culibao, who is all smiles. Weighed in around the cone of shame, made weight successfully, 146.
When did it become the cone of shame?
Well, what do you want to call it?
Well, it's just the cone. There's no shame involved. Like Max Holloway said, why would I cut the extra pound if I don't have to? Weight cutting sucks. Why would I do it?
Pop your jaws off and weigh in around the fellas. But in this one, Matt, Culibao made the weight. So out of both of these guys, I've seen a lot of people say, I'm really surprised you guys took Melsik Baghdasaryan, and I guess with me more in particular, because I haven't been on this Melsik train at all coming into the UFC. I struggled to see the advancements in his takedown defense. I didn't necessarily love the striking game translated over into MMA. And with Joshua Culibao, I bought really low when he made that initial debut against Jalen Turner, up a weight class on short notice. He didn't look good in the fight, and I didn't know what to expect out of his fights just on the regional scene, then into the UFC. But I've been very pleasantly surprised out of Culibao, and there was even a comment today that was like, you guys hyped some of these guys up for 5 minutes and then picked a different fighter. That's exactly what we did in this video. We hyped up Joshua Culibao for the whole thing and then didn't pick him. So I'd be eager to see what people are thinking. Carlos Rodrigues saying, hit the like for the boys. What else? Let's see. Talking about Islam Makhachev. Mike G saying hit the like. It would be appreciated. And then Lucas Taylor. Melsik didn't like the weigh-in finger. Handgun pointed at him. Maybe that was it. But when it does come down to this matchup, Matt, Culibao's looked really good in his last 2 fights.
Yes.
His stance switches are great. His volume's really good. Where he mixes in his power is very fun. Igor MMA's own out of Sydney, Australia on the other side of the country. But I'd like to get your final thoughts on this one. Because Robin's saying I'm split between these two. And I still kind of am. I think I said that in the video too.
It is a really close fight, but the one reason I do favor Melsik is he just moves better on the feet left to right. Like, he'd be a great perimeter defender in the NBA. It's like him and Jason Herzog. Jason Herzog could lock up Luka Doncic. I'm telling you, his stutter step. But I just think Baghdasaryan moves a lot better on the feet, and for that reason, I do give him the edge with the striking. Not that I don't think Culibao is a very heavy-handed boxer, not that I don't think he's a good striker. He does switch his stances, but the issue is he still strikes very much in a straight line, and I think he is going to struggle with some of the movement on the outside from Baghdasaryan. Now, Melsik is going to have to make the most of his own movement, not just use his feet, use his hands to set up his own counter shots, but I think if he is able to effectively do that, it might be a weird fight. It might be a fight where round one's a little bit stale just because both guys are trying to set up their overall shots, but I think once Melsik does find his range and find those openings for his own counter strikes, that's when he will be able to open up a lot more with his hands.
Well, VT, you're too kind over there in the chat, and Brandor likes the Jason Herzog comp. He likes to find himself on Twitter, that man. But Matt, when it does come down to this matchup, fans going with Culibao 54%, 46% with Baghdasaryan. And for me, two trailer park girls go round the outside, round the outside, round the outside. I like the lateral movement and the counters out of a guy like Baghdasaryan. But man, if Joshua Culibao won this fight, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. You just look like a turkey on the internet for a little bit and you move forward. But the odds on this fight, Baghdasaryan open -130. Now the odds are at par. So enough people have like Culibao. The fans like Culibao. Going with Baghdasaryan from the both of us. But it should be a fun fight. And then we get into the main event curtain jerker. The main card curtain jerker. This is the main event of the prelims, so to speak. Tyson Pedro taking on the returning Modestas Bukauskas. Bukauskas tore his knee up. It was disgusting. He rehabbed it. He came back with Cage Warriors. He fought Lee Chadwick. It was a fight that existed. Then he fought Chuck Campbell. It was a fight that existed. It wasn't much fun going back and watching it. Now, it looked like vintage Modestas Bukauskas, kind of playing the volume game on the outside, cutting the cage a little bit, but he's not even cutting the cage when he finishes Campbell. He's chasing Campbell, and then he lands a big right, and Campbell face plants. Bukauskas wins his Cage Warriors light heavyweight belt once again. He gets this opportunity on short notice, replacing Zhang Mingyang and taking on Tyson Pedro. For Pedro, he's dusted a couple of fighters in Ike Villanueva and Harry Hunsucker. Every UFC fight that those guys had, with the exception of, I think, one for Villanueva, you could say, hey, those guys dusted that guy. But when it does come down to this one, Matt, I think it's a fun fight. Blind Dog just moved a lot of snow, Matt. We've had feet of snow.
We have
feet of snow.
Not a bad winter, though, on this side of the country.
Not a bad winter?
I wouldn't say so, but there's been, what, like 2 snowstorms in 1 cold week?
Are you kidding me? There's been so many snowstorms. But when it does come down to this matchup, Matt, these guys don't have to worry about the snow. Pedro, Bukauskas, I think this is a fun fight compared to last winter. We didn't have much for snow last year. This year we have. But these two guys at 205, they bang. This should be a fun one.
I'm just worried about Modestas Bukauskas fighting a finisher his first fight back. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but it would be nice if he could have a fight where he can move around a little bit and just kind of get his feet back under him. And I know the UFC's not really in the business of giving people underhand tosses for fights, but what's Tyson Pedro really good at? Well, he can finish you by submission, and he can finish you by TKO. And he can win by decision, too, because his cardio is not that bad either. I just think for Pedro, not that this is a favorable stylistic matchup, because he's going to have to go out there and get it and be a much more aggressive version of himself, because his last 2 opponents have brought the fight to him, whereas he's going to really have to walk forward against Bukauskas and avoid some of those bigger strikes on the outside. But I think that if Pedro can incorporate the leg kick, which we've seen a lot of in this version of Tyson Pedro, and get his own boxing together, it's not the thing you necessarily think of first when you think about Tyson Pedro. I normally think about the submissions. That's what I immediately go to, but he does have fairly heavy hands when he is able to land against a guy, especially when he's up against the cage, and that's a position that Modestas can find himself in. He does move well left to right, but if a guy can cut the cage off, he gets that tall posture up against the cage, and that's a spot where we see guys get hurt all the time.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they were kind of tough on us here in the last couple of months, saying, oh, well, guys, like, they're waiting for the pullback counter, but if there's a pullback, no counter.
Well, you can't pull back when the cage is behind
and
you.
That's the other truth about it. So when it does come to this one, Matt, and you look at a guy like Bukauskas, like, I like the striking, I like the volume. He gives up range quite a bit and gives up distance in a lot of his fights. So I do like Tyson Pedro, forward movement. I think he's a little bit heavier with his hands, but I'm really eager to see this fight. And Tyson Pedro open to -1,000. The line corrected itself quickly, but he's a -236 favorite. Bukauskas is the underdog. And at Fight Night Picks for the total picks on this one, the Wiseman. So no one can answer me what Rodrigues is the one that missed weight. It was Kleydson Rodrigues that missed the weight in that one. 83% going with Tyson Pedro. So both of us on Pedro. No switch of the pick right there. Doughboy, Craig chugging a Molson. There's some in the fridge. I might have one tonight, but it's the vitamin water. I like the Triple X one. And as a middle schooler, when they had that in the fridge at school, it was kind of weird as a middle schooler going, can I get the Triple X one? Real badass.
Did the lunch lady give you a wink? Like, how
No.
did that interaction go?
But you know what was good? The cafeteria at the high school that you and I went to. Did you ever get the pitas that were almost like Pita Pit?
No, they weren't, Craig.
Oh.
Don't hype those up.
They were
weren't
good,
like
though.
Pita Pit.
Jimmy Crute's taking on Alonzo Menifield, start of the main card. Crute, big time finisher, but we haven't seen it in a number of years. He's taking on Alonzo Menifield, who's been atomic lately. I mean, finishing Ashkar Mazarov and finishing a tricky fighter in Misha Serkinov. Now, obviously, Serkinov Crute fought, Serkinov Menifield fought, and both fights ended in finish, but both ended differently. So I think this is a really fun fight. I definitely do like this one, but it is a tale of two different fighters, and we differed on the pick here.
This fight reminds me a lot of when Dominic Reyes fought Ryan Spann not that long ago. It was, hey, if Dominic Reyes is the fighter he used to be, he should be able to win this one. He's the more technical fighter. He's the more well-rounded guy, you would say. But the problem is, he's fighting a guy who has a tremendous amount of power and can defend a lot of those takedowns, so we'll see what happens. Now, Ryan Spann knocked him out in brutal fashion.
Yeah.
It was insane stuff. But I look at this fight very similar. I do think Jimmy Crute is the more well-rounded out of these two guys. I just worry about where his chin's at this stage of his career, because he gets hit like it's going out of style. Like, it's not a contest to see who can eat the most big shots, and sometimes Jimmy Crute goes in there and he eats the most big shots. Like, even the fight against Anthony Smith, I know that was stopped due to injury because his leg was hurt, but he was getting jabbed up on the outside in that matchup. He was getting lit up with the kicks on the outside too, and that's always been a struggle for Crute. He's a big guy for the division, but he's really only a boxer. He'll throw head kicks, but he doesn't have leg kicks or body kicks. Any of those long-range attacks that help him get respect from the outside.
I don't like to pick against a young prospect that's well-rounded. I completely agree with you. Like, Crute is the more well-rounded martial artist. We've seen that in his fights. Now, for Menifield, you could go, hey, well, he got Mazarov down, he got in top position, and he ground him out. Yeah, but he's not gonna, I don't see him doing that against Jimmy Crute. Unless he completely obliterates him, takes him down.
Exactly.
Hopefully it doesn't end up like Jamal Emmers when he took on Pat Sabatini and then he gives up his leg and a large portion of his career in his prime. But when it does come down to this one, I like the comparison with the Smith just because a guy on the outside like Menifield, he can strike like that. His Muay Thai is very, very good. He can mix in his power strikes. He has good takedown defense. So for those reasons, I do like Menifield in the matchup. And again, I look at him. You got Saif Saud in your corner. I do like that. You got a guy to train with out of Saixon Muay Thai in Chidin Jokwani to work some of that striking with a bigger guy. When it does come down to it, Crute is favored to win the fight. Open minus 230. He's minus 180 right now. Menifield open plus 195, plus 151. I'm really eager to see who the fans are going with in this one. 56% Menifield. So they're going Menifield here. Doughboy Paul, Crute is sprinkle worthy. Professor Chaos, Crute is going to sleep. John
There's
Puffer.
a good chance of that.
This is early for question mark kicks, right? It is. It is.
But this should be a fun fight. And again, we mentioned this a lot at the start of the week. This is an oddly important fight because 205 is wide open right now. You have a brand new champion. The former champion and lineal champion, if you will, is out kind of due to long-term injury. So a really big win, a really impressive win. Not that it gets you in a fight night main event scenario, but you could get a big co-main event slot in a situation like that.
Were Jamal Hill and Joe Rogan, were they cool about Yuri Prohashka on that podcast?
I don't know.
Nah, they weren't.
Well, that's too bad. Because that's going to be an amazing fight when it does happen. I just really like where the 205 division is right now. Because for the longest time, nobody really cared. It was, hey, here's a bunch of guys who John Jones has beat, and it doesn't really matter. Now we have a lot of fresh new talent where it doesn't really have to be over the shadow of like John Jones and Daniel Cormier. So I just really like a lot of these newer fighters that have worked their way up to the top of the division.
All right, move on to a bad fight at heavyweight between the bad man, Justin Tafa, and Parker Porter. They're taking your money to watch two giant heavyweights, one that weighed in now successfully because he missed weight his last time out at 267, but gosh darn it, at 266, Justin Tafa is there to fight, and for Parker Porter, came in at 264. Now watch your P's and Q's when you say his name this time. But Parker Porter, Justin Tafa, a couple of guys that can strike. One guy's definitely more well-rounded and can mix it up in Parker Porter. I would hope that Parker Porter initiates a takedown early in this fight and doesn't mess around with any of the striking But when it does come down to this one, I have Porter for that reason. But my goodness, yeah, Justin Tafa can definitely knock him out.
If Parker Porter goes out there and starts like winging the left hook like he's Dillian White, I'm going to be pissed. I'm not going to be happy because that's a terrible game plan when you're fighting a guy like Justin Tafa who, like you said, is incredibly heavy-handed. And I will say this, to Tafa's credit, I know he weighed in at 266, but I thought physically he did look a little bit better. Like, I thought it was a different kind of weight at least, so I will give him that credit. I just thought physically he did look a little bit better. I still think he's too one-dimensional, though, for me to think he's going to win this fight. Could he get the knockout? Of course. He has fast hands. He does throw very wide looping hooks, and when they land, they're extremely devastating. But I even remember going back and watching the regional tape on Justin Tafa and not being that impressed, honestly, before he came to the UFC. He was getting taken down by guys who, like, only fought him and then never fought again afterwards. Like, he just hasn't had the most impressive of runs. If you ask me, again, if you want to have a different opinion, I'm not going to sit here and say that you're wrong. I just have Parker Porter in this fight because he is the more well-rounded athlete.
And I would have been eager to see his brother Junior on the card too, who was unfortunately unable to make it. Brandor with the super chat. Matt, don't make the mistake of saying that, but Brandor said it in the chat, so now you got to say it. Read it out.
I've got Parker. And hey, Parker Porter. Yeah, hey, it's going to happen. It's an easy name.
I have Parker Porter in the matchup. It should be a fun one regardless, but a lot of people just messed up in the fact that the fights start later and we're starting early. I fly out this afternoon. I can't.
I don't think you guys realize how far away New Brunswick, Canada is from Australia.
That too. Matt, the next fight, you have the hometown guy, Jack Della Maddalena, Randy Brown. Randy Brown weighed in with the cone around him, weighed in successfully at 171. Jack Della Maddalena also weighing in successfully for this matchup. Randy Brown at the press conference, the pre-fight press conference, wearing Balenciaga light-up sunglasses.
It was a look.
I didn't think they were cool. I thought they were expensive, but like they lit up the logo. That's kind of not cool. I don't think that's cool.
Randy Brown looked cooler than either one of us would if we're wearing them. And that's the good thing about Randy Brown. I feel like he's done a good job selling this fight this week because he has played that villain role. He knows he's going into his opponent's hometown. And Jack Della Maddalena has a lot of hype behind him. Like, the hometown crowd pops every single time he is on camera. Just everywhere this guy goes, like, he really does have that, like, hometown hero kind of feel behind him. And this is such an important fight for both guys because if Randy Brown wins, it's a 5-fight win streak now, which cannot be denied. Against a lot of really high-level fighters, you would have finally beat one of the best prospects in the division. It's probably time for Randy Brown to fight somebody in the rankings, you would think. But if Maddalena is able to win, the same thing has to be said for him. He's probably fighting like a Robbie Lawler type character next. And of course, that's not a perfect name, but you get the idea. Just one of those big name guys who might not be at the peak of his powers anymore, but can give some of the rub, if you will, to put it into wrestling terms.
One last time, K. DeMercy. Isn't it supposed to start 2 hours before the prelims? Why did question mark kicks start already? Because I fly out this afternoon and I'm not going to be around 2 hours before. So we pumped it out on the socials yesterday and today, and we mentioned it at the start of the week when we put the video out, that the show was going to be early because I won't be around this weekend. And that's the same reason, Matt, and I wanted to say this now, that we're going to have, and I don't know why it won't start, there we go, that Santos versus Blanchfield is already out there. So you can check out that video. It's already available on the channel, and that is the reason why. So, Matt, when we get back to this big-time banger at welterweight, these two guys can crack, but they do it in different ways. And for Jack Della, he really does mix up his boxing to the body, to the head. He does close distance well. The thing that scared me on the regional scene was he could get held up against the cage. His takedown defense was a little bit questionable. And at range, he can get jabbed up a little bit. Randy Brown can do all of those things that I just mentioned.
He can. Randy Brown is really good at range, but the problem is he's not good at keeping range. And that's what I think he's going to struggle with in this fight. He does have great leg kicks. He has great kicks in general, but then his hands don't really complement his kicks all that well. And if you can get on the inside of his reach, you could really start to hurt Randy Brown with meaningful shots. And we have seen him get hurt in a lot of his fights at this point. And I don't think Jack Della Maddalena is the technician that a guy like Vicente Luque is, but I genuinely do think that their punching power is probably comparable at this point. Like, when Maddalena gets on the inside, he is a wrecking ball with his body shots and with his head shots. And he does remind me a little bit of Luque, if I'm being completely honest. Luque is much more damaging with his submissions. Like, he's got the Darish choke. He has a lot of those. But when you think about what the bare bones of their game are, it's Muay Thai for Luque. He throws a few more kicks. But it's a lot of that high guard boxing, get on the inside, be very damaging with combinations. And Maddalena reminds me a lot of him.
Well, it should be a good fight, Matt. When you have a look at the odds in this one, Della Maddalena is a big favorite. To me, I don't necessarily see it. He's a minus 322 right now. I'm sure the fans definitely have him in this one as well. Let's have a look at the fan vote. 79% of Della Maddalena. I think one of the better underdogs that has a shot on this card is definitely Randy Brown. The thing that scares me is he has been chin checked before in the past. He's even had the chin checked and still rallied through and won some of these fights. So I really do like that. For me, I do have Jack Della Maddalena in this one, but it really is a tricky one. Even Brandor saying Trinaldo gave Brown problems, especially as that fight went on. Yeah. Trinaldo was able to rally through, especially in the third round. Brown slowed down. I don't know if it was like conserved cardio. I dropped him in the first round. I won the second round. Hey, I'm going to win this third round.
But if Maddalena goes to the body, especially early in this fight, and if Brown starts to get tired round 2, round 3, you could really start to expect Della Maddalena to pour it on.
Queen Boudica Radiant, Randy stole his name from Rihanna. Matt, what do you make of that? You're going to get to see Rihanna tomorrow.
Take it, take it, take it, take it.
Do you think she'll sing that song?
I was trying to think, here's my I don't think it's a hot take. I think we're going to hear, feel it coming in the air. And then Jay-Z's going to run out.
Yeah, I think so too.
You probably didn't think you were going to hear me sing this much Rihanna this week.
But you're not going to get a walkout like that because the King of Rio fought last night. But Matt, we do have Yair Rodrigues, Josh Emmett in the division that the King of Rio owned for years and years and years. Rodrigues taking on Emmett for the interim featherweight strap. One guy looked like a skeleton. One guy looked like less of a skeleton, but still a skeleton. Yeah, I have a hard time seeing how both these guys make weight, but they did. So Josh Emmett taking on Yair Rodrigues. Emmett has a lot of fights, but not a ton of miles. Now, when you do look at the fight they had against Calvin Kattar, there's a lot of disagreement who won that fight, who didn't. But Emmett was definitely a guy who looked like he got in a fight after that.
I was going to say, do we need to bring up the medical reports of when he fought Jeremy Stephens?
I mean, the Jeremy Stephens fight was gross, and I interviewed him. It was one of the first interviews on the channel right after that fight happened. He went over to ACB and did a grappling tournament. It was like, hey, how did that come about? And he's like, oh yeah, it was kind of weird, but I wasn't cleared for competition, but I still grappled in that one. Now, obviously, he's come back much stronger since that fight, and he's looked very good. He's had like Hail Mary comebacks. He's like Derek Lewis, like in his fight against Michael Johnson, where he ended up beating him after losing the majority of the fight. So Josh Emmett, big power, good wrestler. We don't necessarily see that wrestling component in a lot of his UFC fights, but you know it is there. And for Yair Rodrigues, we've seen him on the bottom. Like that real gut check fight that he had against Frankie Edgar, the answer. But since then, he's had a lot of very interesting fights. Obviously, lose to Max Holloway, but he gained stock. The shoulder injury in the main event against Brian Ortega still lands him a title shot. So I really like this fight. Eager to see what people are thinking in this one in terms of a pick. Cole Richter, or is it Richter, saying, morning, boys. Appreciate the content and coverage as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then MPTV, what time is QMK? Let me check. WTF. Forget about it.
Not everybody's been here since you've explained. I'm so excited for this fight, though. Again, I think this is going to be fight of the year type caliber stuff, and I'm trying not to over-exaggerate it whatsoever. I just think that both these guys have such a fun fighting style because Emmett, like I've said, he's going to keep you on the edge of your seat, even if this is a terrible fight. Remember when Wonder Boy fought Darren Till, and it was awful? It's one of the worst fights ever, but I vividly remember watching that fight live, and I was like on the edge of my seat.
You were Luis Smolka in that one.
You were, because you were always worried that something big was about to happen, or any big action was about to change the momentum of this fight. This is going to be the exact same as that, but I do think we're going to get a lot more activity out of both fighters. Yair Rodrigues has great kicks from the outside. He's a very speedy kicker with the power going along with it. And I'll be curious to see how Josh Emmett deals with that range, because A, he throws nothing for kicks. He'll throw an inside leg kick every now and then, but his offense is very reminiscent of a much shorter Dan Henderson. Inside leg kicks, overhands, good boxing, wrestling that's used primarily in a defensive manner, but I do think we will see a little bit of offensive wrestling out of Josh Emmett in this fight.
Is Josh Emmett more Mark Hunt to Hendo if he gets a guy down on the mat? Do you think he'll hold up on just like jumping in with a big time shot?
I don't think he's going to knock out Yair on the feet and then drop him with a shot on the ground like that. I just mean wrestling-wise. If Emmett is ever going to use his wrestling offensively in a fight, you would have to assume it's against Yair Rodrigues, who's not even balanced half the time. He's not... Like, the thing that Yair Rodrigues does so well is that nothing he does is ordinary. It's really hard to game plan for a guy like Yair Rodrigues. I was thinking about why I enjoy watching him fight so much, and it reminds me of what I always used to think of with Damian Maia. I like Damian Maia so much because this was the question I would always ask myself. How do you get ready for him? He's better at jiu-jitsu than your jiu-jitsu coach is. So what is your coach going to teach you that Damian Maia doesn't already know? Yair Rodrigues is somewhat reminiscent of that with his striking. Not that he is the highest level of all time or he's the most accolades of all time, but he is so unique with the way that he is a striker in MMA. You really can't prepare for it one-to-one. And I know guys in the past have brought in Alex Caceres. That's a guy who made half of his career on being a training partner to try to replicate what Yair Rodrigues is able to do. He's not able to.
And I know that he had a fight booked and he had an injury, but another guy that trains at Team Alpha Male, it's the token guy that fights like Yair Rodrigues, or can replicate his length in the lower weight classes, is my wife's most unfavorite nickname, Andre Touchy-Feely. But if you do look at it, and he got hurt, so his fight fell out. But when I look at a matchup like this, Matt, for Yair Rodrigues, to me, it is the distance. It's the accumulation of damage. The fact that he can add that uptick in volume in some of these fights, and the fact that he was able to do it against Max Holloway. I just like him in this one. I see a lot of people saying 50-50. Doughboy Paul saying it's pop and popcorn.
Brandor, that's a good point. He is very Raymond Daniels-esque.
78% of or 76 now, going with Rodrigues to get the win. Again, I think it's a really fun fight. So what are your final thoughts on this one? Is the pick still the same here?
I like Yair's output, so I do favor him if it does go to a decision, unless he gets dropped in every single round and ends up losing them for that. And I think he can win by stoppage, too. If both guys had a difficult weight cut, Yair can switch stances and throw kicks to either side of your body. And he can do that from a range that you can't punch him from. So for those reasons, I think we can even see like how Yair dropped Jeremy Stephens with the body when he fought him. I think those kicks will be open when he fights Josh Emmett. I have an insane amount of respect for Josh Emmett because of how talented he is and how tough he is. I just think this is a tough matchup for him.
Toss a like for the boys as we move along and more people tune in as the day goes on, because they're going to be checking into this one after the fact. But Matt, in the main event, Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski. And if a like wasn't enough, we threw up the poll in the chat. 64% of you right now going with Makhachev to get the win. So listen, Alexander Volkanovski, as I said, I dreamt the dream, and the dream was that Volkanovski outstrikes Islam Makhachev and beats him. And it's been just playing in my head all week. Volkanovski, 2 belts like he's Conor McGregor on top of the
cage. Does he defend the takedown in this dream?
The dream's just striking. It's blurry.
Okay.
I don't remember my dreams vividly.
I
have sleep apnea, man. It just doesn't happen.
Wow.
But when I do look at this matchup, like for Makhachev, his striking's improved. His English has improved. I think out of anybody that's gained any stock this week, I think for me, it's got to be this guy right here and not the guy in the background.
Take this picture off before I make the point I'm going to make.
Okay.
His striking has improved. But there's people out there that are like, oh, Islam's like the best striker in the division now. Those people got to stop. Islam's only a good striker because of the threat of his takedown. And I'm not disrespecting his striking by saying that, but when you watch guys fight Islam, okay, think about any sport. There's like a defensive posture. There's postures that they teach you in any sport when you first start out. Like, I can't skate, so I don't know what it is on skates. But for like basketball, you get low, you get your base wide. That is your posture. It's really difficult to fight a fight when your butt is further back than your shoulders. And that's how everybody has to fight Islam Makhachev, because they're so ready for the takedown. Like, go back and remember when even Ally Quinta fought Khabib, they were like, ooh, that was a close fight back in the day. Not really.
No.
He fought the majority of that with his butt back, trying to defend a lot of those takedowns.
Man, I think all of it opens up Islam Makhachev's striking
of course
to the point
it does.
where it's not that it just looks good. I think it is good, and it continues to get better. And we even saw it in his fight against Charles Oliveira. What set up the knockout?
No.
He threw from southpaw stance. He threw a head kick. It brought Oliveira's hands up, and then all of a sudden, as Oliveira lunged forward,
we're saying the same
he's
thing.
able to land his hands.
But all of that was from the fact that Oliveira had to back up the whole time. He couldn't move forward because the second he was going to take a step forward, Islam goes underneath and goes for the legs. If Islam wasn't a good wrestler, his striking wouldn't be like dropping Charles Oliveira. It's just his wrestling is so dominant and so intimidating that that's what everybody has to worry about from the second they start the fight till the second they end. Think about Dustin Poirier, great boxer. He's in a good posture for defending takedowns. He couldn't throw strikes against Khabib because he was so terrified of the takedown. Volkanovski is a much more technical striker than Islam. He's the much faster striker, but the thing is, he's not a one-hitter quitter knockout artist, and you hit on that earlier on in the week. When Volkanovski gets TKOs, it's an accumulation of damage. It's significant strikes where he's landing 100 punches a round, and it's really taking an effect on his opponent. So I just think unless Volkanovski can defend 13 of 15 takedowns before the end of round 3, it's going to be a difficult matchup.
Wow, and you talk about, okay, these fighters are fit and ready. I mean, for Alexander Volkanovski, he's doing, like, hand glides off the monkey bars. Like, he's been doing it all his life. Maybe Alexander Volkanovski's like Spider-Man, or he's like Gecko Man, because he's got, like, the little ridges in his hands.
But Volkanovski's definitely one of those guys who can just pick up any ball, any sport, just figure it out, because that's the level of athlete he is. And I know they're going to talk about the rugby and stuff, but it is true. Like, when you've carried around that much weight for the majority of your life, you do develop like kind of a natural strength.
Yeah,
it's like farm strength.
I mean, father's plan. Habib could too. He'd just hold on to the ball, run down the court, and then put it in. Nobody played defense. But for me, I do like Islam Makhachev. I do think the wrestling's there. Again, was Alexander Volkanovski a Greco-Roman champ in Australia? He was. He was 12, and it was 2001. So, for me, obviously, I'm not that stupid. I realize how good Alexander Volkanovski's MMA wrestling is. If you want the best example of it, remember his fight against Canadian Junior Bacon Cheeseburger, Jeremy Kennedy. That is probably one of the best examples of Volkanovski's dominance with his wrestling. And if you want to say, oh, well, his defensive wrestling's not that good for Volkanovski here, you go, oh, well, Chad Mendes took him down. Chad Mendes took him down. Volkanovski butt scooted all the way back as quick as he could, got back up to his feet, and kept on going.
You can't butt scoot, though, against this style of wrestling because they immediately wrist control and get you on your back.
For me, I have so much respect for these guys. And both guys, like, I like how they're not mean mugging each other. They're being really nice to each other. Volkanovski, like, opening it up for Rodrigues and Emmett. And so if Volkanovski, let's say he loses this fight, goes back down to 145, well, then there's no blood against the winner of that fight, Rodrigues or Emmett. And if he wins this fight, I honestly don't know what happens at 155. But Matt, we're going to touch on all of these fights once more. Question mark kicks, as I said earlier, make sure you check it out. The video's already out there. Santos versus Blanchfield. It's on the channel, so make sure you check out that one. It might fly under the radar, but it was out there before the pay-per-view and before the Super Bowl tomorrow. And then Super Bowl, like, it continues to play into Monday. So it's already out right now. So make sure you check that one out. Likes are always appreciated. The super chat, Brandor threw out there. He's been the MVP of the show today. Matt, we will throw it on back to the start of the fight. And we'll go down one. Zubaira Tukhugov looked like this on the scale. I pick him to still win, but the last time that he missed weight and actually fought, he fought against a guy in Hakeem Dawodu, Canadian, and he looked bad in that fight. So I do have Tukhugov in this one, but I don't have the most confidence.
Do you think maybe
now.
he was just like doing his part of the wave, like it went around the room, then it just got to him on the... No, I do have Tukhugov. Again, he looked terrible on the scales. This is a huge step up in competition, so I'm going to stick with the pick. I'm very curious to see where he goes after this, though, to be completely honest with you. Like, I have no idea what they do.
Yeah, Bellator is the play. Shane Young's taking on Blake Bilder, and I'm going with can he build it? Yes, he can, Blake Bilder.
I also have Blake Bilder in this one, but it should be a fun fight early on the card.
Looma Lookboonmee taking on Elise Reed, and I think Reed has a decent shot as an underdog in the matchup. The line's way too far apart, so I do have Loma Lookboonmee in the matchup, but it is a tricky one here.
I agree 100%. I think it's a close fight, but I also have Loma.
All right, the next fight, Jenkins taking on Shainis. I've got Jenkins, but this is another one of those ones. If you had Don Shainis go and throw hammers, drop Jenkins, get his back, and then submit him, I don't think it would surprise anybody. Super chat from Cole Richter saying, have a great rest of the day, boys. Sincerely love and appreciate the content as always. Thank you so much. There's been a lot of
Mario Yamasaki for
a lot of positive people out there this week. Cole, that is much appreciated. Matt, the Suns don't win a championship, right? Chris Paul sucks now?
I don't like Chris Paul that much, if I'm being honest, but they have one of the greatest players of all time now with Devin Booker, so they're probably going to win the title if you want my honest opinion.
Jenkins, Shainis, I have Jenkins.
I also have Jenkins.
All right. Mullarkey, Prado, I have Mullarkey.
might have something to say. I also have Mullarkey.
All right. Next matchup, Ross versus Rodrigues. I have Rodrigues.
I also have Rodrigues, but the weight miss worries me.
Missed the weight. Baghdasaryan, Culibao feels bad because we're going, if I'm not mistaken, isn't he the underdog in Baghdasaryan and the fans all have Culibao?
Exactly.
I have Baghdasaryan here.
Yeah, we're going out on a limb. I've also got Melsik.
All right. The last fight on the prelims, Pedro versus Bukauskas. Not going with the Baltic Gladiator, going with Tyson Pedro.
I like Tyson Pedro in this matchup, but if he wins this, he finally has to fight someone who is in that like top 15 category, I would say.
I'm in the same boat as VT. Hopefully Grant Williams can win that ship. Matt, Jimmy Crute taking on Alonzo Menifield. I have Menifield in this one.
I have Crute, but it's one of those weird fights where it's close, but it probably won't be by the time the fight happens. Yeah, I've got Jimmy Crute.
7 more likes for over the hump for 100. That would be appreciated. Tafa's taking on Porter. Going with Parker Porter to get the win.
Got Parker Porter.
Owns his own gym. Heavy hitters. Matt, Jack Della Maddalena taking on Rude Boy Randy Brown. Going with Della, but again, another one of those underdogs that makes me kind of double think. Is Randy Brown in this one?
I've got Maddalena in the matchup, but Randy Brown is by far the toughest fighter Maddalena has ever fought. Whereas for Brown, he's fought some really great fighters in this division already and has a lot of good high-level experience, but I still have Maddalena.
All right, now we look at the last 2 fights on this card, both for the titles. Yair Rodrigues versus Josh Emmett, a great fight for the interim featherweight strap. I have Yair Rodrigues, who debuted off the Ultimate Fighter Latin America Season 1. He won the season, and that was a Fabricio Verdum card.
It was. I have Yair Rodrigues as well, and I think him versus Alexander Volkanovski would be an insanely entertaining fight if it ever does happen. But I gotta be honest, now that I think about it, Josh Emmett versus Alexander Volkanovski would also be an amazing fight. So I have Yair Rodrigues, but again, if we do end up getting the unification about next, I would be so excited no matter what combination we get.
MPTV, Tafa couldn't even shut Van Der's lights off, but that was a fun fight. Matt, Makhachev taking on Volkanovski. I do have, and still in the lightweight division to continue the roll, 23-1, Makhachev to get the win and hand Volkanovski's first loss in the UFC.
It is kind of wild. Volkanovski's been in there with a very high level of competition, basically from go, and I think he is probably going to suffer his first loss. It's wild to say because of how skilled of a fighter he is, but when you look at the face-off, it's hard not to favor Makhachev just for his overwhelming size advantage and the fact that he is such a dominant wrestler and such a skilled fighter in his own right. I do have Islam, but hopefully Volkanovski can make this a very competitive fight.
Well, to everybody out there, make sure you check it out. Tyler Santos taking on Aaron Blanchfield in the main event coming up next weekend. The video's already out there. It's in the playlist. All the individual videos are ready to go, basically. So that is out there right now. You've got a co-main event that is a big-time head-scratcher between Zach Paunga and Jordan Wright. But 6 debuts on that card. Something to get excited about for everybody. I think it should be a fun one.
Cole Victor, why'd you have to get personal like that in the chat? I think it should be a fun card too. Again, that main event of next weekend's fight night could be a title eliminator. I know that's wild to say, but Tyler Santos gave a very good account of herself in that title fight against Valentina Shevchenko, and Erin Blanchfield has been nothing if not dominant on her way to the top of the division, so I think it's a really fun fight for both those athletes involved.
Enjoy the card later on tonight. It should be a great one. Make sure you check out those Instagram polls. Let us know who you have in these fights coming up tonight. You can find it at Fight Night Picks, Instagram, Twitter, at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP. The content is out there. I'm gone next week, so if there's any fights that switch up, it'll be later on in the week that we'll be able to update those and maybe post individual videos if that does happen. So enjoy your weekend. Enjoy all of the fights. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, thank you for the super chat,
Thank you,
Brandor.
Brandor. Let's get into it.